knows that I don't know if everybody knows that we have the 21 show up for an extra month at Summit Spice and Tea this month. And so we're taking that down on the 27th. And so if you want to collect your 21 print, that would be a perfect time to come and do that. Otherwise, we'll try to bring them to the museum in March, but that's not the best option. So you can always contact me to make an arrangement. So that's just the 21 show. 22 show will be up starting in March. Pretty exciting at Summit for a month. And then this weekend is when we have the framed prints to collect, and that's at the Summit Spice and Tea parking lot from 11 to 1. So if you can't make it then, just let me know. So I think that's it. Did I miss anything?
I don't think so.
I think you got it all, Jen, except to remind everybody that our next meeting after this one is going to be live at the museum. And we are working on making that to be a hybrid meeting, so you don't have to be there in person. That we will be Zooming it live, so you can watch it from home if everything goes the way that we're hoping. Alan, I know he went and tested everything out with a new piece of equipment that we're getting, and really super excited about it. Mike DeYoung will be there talking about his judging and what he thinks makes a good competitive image. So,
and he's going to hand out the awards also. So, oh, and one more thing. Sorry, Kathy, I hope I'm not interrupting.
Nope.
We found out today, this is the 35th year for Alaska Wild. So pretty exciting.
Wow, that means I've been a board member for ASONP for a really long time, because Alaska Wild didn't exist when
Good evening.
On the board.
Can you hear me or not?
Yes. Yes. Does anybody else have announcements? Anything they want to promote?
Warm weather.
I've got something. So next week for Alaska Photographic Center, I don't know how many of you know Javed Kamali. He is a physician in the ICU at, I think it's Providence, and he's been working on a series of photographs on the pandemic from the point of view of the healthcare workers. And I've seen some of his work, and it is incredible. And he is doing the APC presentation next Tuesday night. And I highly recommend, I mean, his work is fantastic in this particular series. So I highly recommend it. And you can go to APC's website for the Zoom link. It's next Tuesday night at 7.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gail. I think I posted it, or no, I'll have it posted in the e-news for next week.
Yeah, I didn't get the information until today, so.
Yeah, I'll make sure. I think it's already in there, ready to go, so.
Thanks.
And just
so I guess, Carl, would you like to introduce QT?
I would be happy to. So I heard of QT's National Parks Project pretty much before there were blogs, before there was social media. I don't know how I found out about it. I think it may have been through, if you all remember photo.net, it may have been through that community. I'm not sure, but I think a lot of us desire to be able to engross ourselves in a photographic project, but QT's work on our national park system takes it to an entirely new level. The amount of work that went into this book, and it's not a coffee table book. It combines everything you can imagine you would want in a photographic book about national parks, from natural history information to a practical guide to technical and creative information. The digital supplements are amazing. And if that wasn't enough for him, he also just recently came out with, it's over here in the background, a book about our national monuments as well. But we're here tonight to hear about his amazing projects on our national parks, as Ken Burns called it, America's Best Idea. And here is America's Best collection of photography about our national parks in QT's book, Treasured Lands. With it, I will hand it over to QT for his presentation.
Thank you, Carl, for the introduction, and thank you to all of you for tuning in today. So I'm honored to have been invited to present with you. So I'm going to try to share my screen. Let's see here. Okay. Actually, I clicked share screen, and it said host disable participant screen sharing.
I'm working on it. Just a moment.
Okay.
There, you should be able to now.
All right, here we are. Okay, and so I'm to go full screen. Okay, share. Okay, here we are. Okay, now I'm to go full screen with my slides. Okay, here we are. Okay. So I'm going to begin by introducing myself a bit and the origin of the project, because I was a more unlikely person than all of you to have photographed national parks. I was born in Paris, France. I grew up as a city kid. During my college years, some friends took me up the high peaks of the Alps, and there I made a connection with nature. So I saw, so in America, and in particular in Alaska, we are lucky to have plenty of wilderness, but in Europe, they were limited to the high peaks of the Alps. So at first, my goal was just to try to record what I saw, and I took photography at that point to bring back the beauty of the high peaks to the folks who couldn't get there. So this is the summit of Mont Blanc. I was just doing a quick shot before trying to go down and escape the storm. But soon I began to realize that sometimes light could create like magic in the mountain. So a friend gave me that book, which had just been published, and I realized that the type of photography that I was doing could be elevated to an art form. So that was my last climb in the Alps. I had begun to understand a bit about the light. And so instead of having an alpine start, I had time the climb to be there at sunset. So the priorities were beginning to change. So that was my last climb in the Alps, because the next winter, I moved to California. So I went to the University of California at Berkeley to work on a self-driving car project. At that time, I had just finished my graduate work, and I was looking for a job in the US. I didn't know much about this country, but also climbers had told me that there was some good rocks to climb in Yosemite. At that time, I didn't know anything about the national parks. I didn't know anything about the geography of the US, but I chose Berkeley because of all the great research universities. It was the closest to Yosemite. So I didn't know much about the park either, but all I knew was that there was a 3,000-foot high cliff there, El Capitan, the highest in North America. I discovered there a vertical world at a scale new to me. The climb took several days to complete, and in order to sleep, so you bring those portable platforms, which are called portalages. They are very comfortable, just have to make sure that you don't roll on your sleep. So I didn't fall out of the portalage, and I still managed to snap a few photos. So that was in the year of 1993. The same year, the mountain cold again, and I came to Alaska, to a destination familiar to you, to climb Denali, highest peak in North America. What makes the climb special is that it's a combination of Arctic mountaineering and expedition. So you build those walls to protect your tent against the wind. The climb takes between 2 to 3 weeks. So you cannot carry everything that you need in your backpack. So you haul with your supplies with a sled. And eventually I didn't freeze to death, and I managed to make it to the summit. With the glaciers extending to the horizon, that was the most pristine mountain I'd ever seen. The fall of the same year, I went to Death Valley, and I'd never seen a desert and sand dunes before. The rock formations mesmerized me, and I was standing at the lowest point in North America at Badwater, the place where the hottest temperature on Earth was recorded. Was just a few months before I was still on the coldest mountain on Earth. So here you see a view of the salt flat there, and yet there were some similarities with the glaciers in the valley here from Denali. So I realized that the national parks encompass so much diversity, and because I'd seen both Denali and McKinley, I could appreciate those contrasts. And so that's when I began to be interested in trying to visit more of the national parks. So when I came here, I began to learn about the American landscape photography tradition. The prints that I saw in the local museums were the most beautiful I'd ever seen. And I decided to try to photograph with the same cameras as the masters. On my trip to Death Valley, I made this image. And when I came back home, I saw more detail on the transparency than I was able to see at the scene. So in particular, everything in the background, in the foreground, was equally sharp, which was possible because the large format camera has the tilt that allows you to focus on any plane, even a receding plane, in that case, the desert floor, instead of just a plane parallel to the back of the camera. So the other thing that the camera allows you to do is to control the perspective. For instance, in this scene, maintain the trunks parallel and therefore keep the sense of serenity of the scene using this control where you can just reframe the image by raising the lens instead of pointing the camera up, which would cause the trees to converge like that. But the most distinctive feature of the camera is of course, the large image area, 5x7, 25 times more than 35 millimeter or full frame. And that's what allows you to record that much detail. So here, so you see that to operate the camera, you have to use the dark close because the image is very dim. Working with a large format camera, everything is manual, not only the focus and the exposure, but also even the management of the film. And so you have to open up this dark slide so that you're able to expose the film. You put it back the other way so you know which film is exposed. And usually it takes so much time to set up the camera that always make a second exposure for insurance. So with both exposures, the cost of a shot is about $20, including the lab processing fees. So because of that, large format photography is a very deliberate activity. So here is the pictures that I took. So even if you work with the smaller cameras, you can still have the same benefit as that camera that slows you down. If you just try to pretend that your camera is very cumbersome and heavy. So those two strengths, my desire to see the diversity of the national parks for myself, and large format photography combined to inspire me to embark on a project to be the first to photograph all the national parks in large format. And so instead of returning to France, as I had meant after a few years, I made my home here in the San Francisco Bay Area and started to visit the national parks. So there's now 63 national parks. They stretch from the southern hemisphere. Here is the National Park of American Samoa. Okay, let me try to see if I can get rid of this thing here. Okay, to the Arctic. So here is Gates of the Arctic, the Arigage Peaks. So when I was there, I was in the park for about a week, and at one point I was having breakfast, and I noticed that the peaks that had been in the clouds just appeared shortly. So I just hurried up to set up the camera, and I was able to make this image shortly after the window closed again. And for the rest of the week, the peak would not reappear again. So to get there, I flew into Anchorage, Fairbanks, Beatles, and then chartered a floatplane because there's no roads in the park. So here is Lake Clark National Park. So kind of in your backyard from Anchorage, just 1 hour away from Anchorage by air, but still, and much more comfortable to visit since you can stay at a lodge. This is just a day hike from the place where you land there, but still a place that offers wilderness adventures similar to Gates of the Arctic. So here is Turquoise Lake, so the place where we were dropped by plane. So this image, you see that I looked for foreground actually that was mirroring the background, and I was fortunate to be able to find those four stones in the water. They just mirror the four clouds in the sky. So this kind of details, it gives a connection between your foreground and the background, and it brings more cohesiveness to the picture. Kenai Fjord National Park in Alaska, another easy to access park, and Exit Glacier used to be the easiest glacier to exit, to access. So the picture was taken in 2001. So back then you could just walk to the top of the glacier. So the idea behind this image is to have ice reflected in ice. But in order to make the image, I had to come right at sunrise, first because I think the frost in that small pond would melt during the day, and second, that what makes the picture work is that the foreground is in the shadow, so it produces a strong reflection. so that image is taken in 2016, and where I was standing was the point where the trail ended in 2010. So you see that even in those 6 years between 2010 and 2016, the glacier has retreated that much, and now you cannot walk to the glacier anymore because you're separated from the trail by that steep terrain. But that's maybe one of the places where the glacial retreat is the most dramatic and most easier to observe. Denali National Park. So we've seen some images from the summits. So this is from the tundra, and so I'm going to show you a pair of images here. You see this one was taken in beautiful late afternoon light, and you would think that that would be ideal conditions for landscape photography, and it's beautiful scene. But in that scene, which is taken on an overcast day, the fact that there is no bright sun reveals the color like direct sunlight doesn't do directly. So any light conditions, in fact, are present opportunities if you know how to take advantage of it. So the sky was a bit bright there, but I just darkened it with a grad filter. And so my objective on that trip was, of course, to photograph the mountain. So I stayed at Wonder Lake using a backcountry permit. So I was able to stay very close to the lake, just a few miles from there. I was there for 3 days, and one of the evening I got lucky and I was able to make that photograph. And if you have the national park brochure, you will notice this is a cover image of the official Denali brochure. Wrangell St. Elias National Park. So that's Kenai, incredible historic structure, maybe the most impressive I've seen. And now it is the easiest place to access a glacier in a national park. So from Kenai, from the mile, it's less than 2 miles of hiking to a point where you can get onto the glacier. So my plan was to try to climb the peak that you see on the top right, in order to be able to depict the immensity of the park. So to do that, I had to cross the glacier. Here you see a backpack typical of Alaskan trips with a large format camera. I have all my backcountry gear. Those backpacks, they frequently add up to 60, 70 pounds. So the glacier looks flat at first, but it's full of nooks and crannies like that glacial stream. And if you're reasonably fit, you can even go under the ice. It's non-technical. The guides in Kenai will take you there. So under the ice, you have this beautiful blue light there. So all those crevasses meant that I had to make many zigzags, and it took me an entire day to cross about 2 or 3 miles of glacier. So I set up my camp at the base of the mountain, and initially I was just going to go for a day trip, but in the afternoon I noticed that the air was hazy because of forest fires. So instead of going down to my camp, I decided to stay on the peak. Fortunately, I had my stove to brew myself a warm tea before a very cold night. And in the morning, I was able to make that image. So Kenai National Park, so of course, the main attraction for most visitors is Brooks Falls and the bears. But as a landscape photographer, I was also interested in the landscape of the park. So here is a short hike just from Brooks Canyon up to Dumpling Mountain. Have you done that hike? Yeah, it's a beautiful view. And for further exploration, we went into the Valley of 10,000 Smokes. So the Valley of 10,000 Smokes is actually the reason why the park was created, when there was the largest recorded eruption in the 20th century. So it buried this valley, which was once verdant, under 700 feet of ash and pumice. And just in 1 century, erosion has already carved those deep gorges there. So back to Brooks Camp, I tried to make a picture with a bear environment, and it's difficult to photograph the bear with a large format camera. So I contented myself with photographing the huge paw prints. But as I was under the dark clouds to compose this image, I felt the presence behind me, and I thought, it's could that be? It's a bit early. It's dawn. And then when I turned back, I saw that there was a bear approaching me. He was just maybe 10 feet away. So I'd remember that at the orientation, they tell you that not to run because it triggers the hunting instinct. So I tried to keep my composure and retreat slowly. And eventually I was able to hide behind the tree. Unfortunately, the bear was more interested in my camera gear than having me for breakfast. So Glacier Bay National Park, when Captain George Vancouver sailed there in the 18th century, that spot was a solid sheet of ice. In 2 centuries, the glaciers have retreated 65 feet, which is the largest glacial retreat in history. So now you have to go way in the back of the bay to see them. So this image shows you the glacier which was in the background, the Lamplugh Glacier. The kayak give you the scale. So that was a 2-week trip too, and we were able, surprisingly, we were able to pack everything in a double kayak. Usually I travel solo, but I was fortunate to have been able to recruit a partner actually during a presentation. Otherwise, I might have been swept away. The tides are so strong there. So the first day we paddled and we saw that maybe we would stop when it get dark, but it was May. So we ended up setting camp at around 11. I went to my tent at midnight, but then as I was getting to go to sleep, I noticed that the light was growing already brighter. And so I went out and then I saw that iceberg in the water. It was maybe 100 yards away. And at the speed at which the water was moving, the tide was moving down, I knew that it would soon be out of the water. So I walked into the water. I set up my camera while standing in the water, and I was able to make that image just as the water line reached it. And so it turned out, also it was the second day of the trip, it turned out to be my favorite picture because it reminded me of that day when I was awake almost for 24 hours. So the last park that I visited in Alaska was Quebec Valley National Park, which is also above the Arctic Circle. So here it is an airport shuttle that you see. So our plan was to fly into a native village, Ambler. So it's not every day that you get to meet your airport shuttle driver, I suppose. Meeting the Inupiaq was one of the highlights of the trips. So we took in with us an inflatable kayak. Here's my wife hard at work inflating it. And our plan was to float the Quebec Valley, the Quebec River, down to Kenai, another Eskimo village, and from there go back to civilization. So we saw that it would be a leisurely trip, a floating trip, but the river is so placid actually that when the wind blows hard, if you don't paddle hard, you just go backwards. So that was actually quite a hard trip. But then when I set up my camera on the Great Sand Dunes, that was the year 2022. I completed my goal to do my first round of national parks visit. Back then, there was 58 national parks. So this is just a summary of the 8 national parks that you have in Alaska. Lucky you. So the year 2001 is when I started my photography business. So back then, like Carl mentioned, there was no social media, no Flickr, and it was just a start. Other photographers were skeptical that would be of any help, but I was hoping to create a photography business based on the internet. And eventually I was able to do it thanks to visitation. So here you can see some of the visitation numbers there. And this allowed me to leave my job as a computer scientist and become a full-time photographer about 2007. And it also led to some other opportunities. For instance, Dayton Duncan and Ken Burns found about my work by stumbling on my website when they were doing research for their project. And so how I was able to do that, it was that back then I was doing search engine optimization before the term was invented. And so you see here, for instance, a search for fairly competitive term, pictures of America, 724 million results. Back then, that Terra Galleria had #1 result. So that's how I did it. So unfortunately, things have changed, and so now there is 4 times more results for that same query, you know. And then other folks now they got into the practice of doing SEO. So now you see I'm no longer there. So I mean it's still on the 3rd page, but it just doesn't cut it anymore. And so in photography, you know, it's a difficult business where you have to be creative and just be there at the right moment. So I was there when the internet started with the search engine. After that, there was social media. Now maybe NFTs, but there's a lot of drawbacks with them, of course. So becoming a full-time photographer allowed me to spend even more time on the project, and I tried to visit the parks in each seasons. Winter is my favorite. Summer is my least favorite. All in total, I did about 400 parks visits if you count Yosemite. And so another thing that changed in the 21st century was the emergence of digital photography. So I got one of the first digital cameras. Back then it was the Canon 1DS. It costed $8,000 and it was a 16 megapixel camera. But still, the high sensitivity of the camera opened the door to night photography. Film was not just sensitive enough. So night photography offers you more creative possibilities because besides the other factors that you have by daytime, you have the phase of the moon and the sites which sometimes to time get crowded during the day regain their quiet and their mystery at night. The light, the moonlight is actually just like sunlight. And for instance, here you see a moon set. At that time of the night, the light of the moon, you cannot see it with your eyes. The color of the light of the moon, you cannot see it with your eyes, but it does create a very warm light similar to a sunset, which is captured by the camera. The sensitivity of the digital allowed me to capture the aurora through this photograph along the Dalton Highway, looking into gates of the Arctic National Park. And here the fireflies in the Great Smoky Mountain National Park. So those images, they were taken with a lens which was a 1.4 lens, 35 millimeter 1.4 lens. I maxed the ISO at whatever was would not yield too much noise, 6,400 or something like that. And still, it was an exposure time of 15 minutes. So it's to tell you how sensitive the camera has to be to capture those. So in the Great Smoky Mountain, for a period of about 2 weeks in June, the fireflies gather and then they just blink in unison. So the forest is just like a giant Christmas tree. So one of the most wonderful sights I've seen in nature. And the Great Smoky Mountain National Park is only one of the 3 places in the world where you can see that. So if you want more information about this write-up on my blog, it has a lot of information for photographers. So with a smaller camera, I also started to do wildlife photography. So my approach to wildlife is, instead of trying to photograph with a telephoto, to have a more intimate view. So here are Dall sheep in Denali. And so I just stayed there for a while in the same spot. And when you do that, the animal will start to approach you and come to you, and look at you. And that's how I was able to take this intimate picture. So here, that's not your typical bird photography. So this was taken with a wide-angle lens, a 24 millimeter lens, and the exposure time was several seconds. So why so long? Because it was in a slot canyon, and so it was very dark. So the picture was made in Zion National Park. And so besides the narrows where you can walk in, there's a number of smaller canyons that require technical canyoneering, the use of rope to access. And they are partly flooded. The thing which is interesting is that outside in the desert, the temperature is 100 degrees. But if you didn't wear a wetsuit, you would get hypothermic in no time because the water is freezing in those salt canyons. They never see the sun. Speaking of water, that is in Channel Island National Park. The kelp forest comprises the fastest growing plants on Earth, and scuba diving there is just like moving in the forest in 3 dimensions. On the other side of the continent, Biscayne National Park, the lowest national park in the country, maximum elevation 9 feet. Most of the park is underwater, so and also to go scuba diving to photograph them. So the trick here also is to try to stay still so that the fish come to you. Otherwise, when you try to chase them, even when you go snorkeling, you will just end up photographing fish tails. So I mounted an exhibit of photograph of national parks. He traveled across the country. That's an installation at the Boston Museum of Science. But exhibit comes and go. So for the anniversary of the National Park Service in 2016, I wanted to celebrate the occasion by releasing a book. So in doing that, I was inspired by this book called The National Park Portfolio, which was published in 1916, more than 100 years ago. So the National Park Portfolio was published in order to lobby for the creation of the National Park Service. Stephen Matter, who would become the first director of the National Park Service, funded it out of his own pocket for the first edition. So at that time, there were less than 10 national parks. So it was called the National Park Portfolio because it came in 9 booklets. And so with only less than 10 national parks, each of the fascicles gave a fairly complete picture of each national park. So which is Stephen's Matter own assessment, okay, that representative presentation of the park. The second feature of the National Park Portfolio is that it was an invitation for visitors to come visit the park. So you see this railroad map, and then this Yosemite belongs to you. So those two were what inspired me in creating my own book. So I wanted to have a book that gave a more complete picture of the park than existed before. So not only the main parks that everybody knows about, but also the lesser known park, and each park tried to visit each of the corners of the park. So for instance, here, Canyonlands National Park that has 4 districts. So there is here Island in the Sky, so the Maze District on the left, the Needle District on the right, and down there the Horseshoe Detached Unit, pictures by day and by night. And and besides besides pictures, I wanted to give information, because other national other coffee table book, they inspire you with beautiful picture, but they leave you wondering, about the locations, and from time to time, you can't even find out where the picture was taken. So here, for each of the image in the book, I have a paragraph of text that explains where the location is, and some details about how to get there, and best time of the year, best time of the day. So for instance, the sunrise here for the Mesa Arch, and a map that indicates where each picture is taken. So that was my vision for the book, and that was the specifications that I needed to be able to fit all those materials. I started to approach publisher, but that was a very ambitious project, and nobody wanted to take it on. And so I decided to try to do it myself, but I began to design the book. I passed around this draft of design, but then I was told that the design wasn't great. And so then I began to work with a professional designer, and it makes a big difference. So that one of the lessons of that is that, we are photographers, we are not necessarily designers. And so, for instance, some of the things that the designer saw is this type of groupings, where on that spread, everything is unified by those vertical stripes, right? So this, or, this spread here in Glacier Bay. So in the middle of the spread, initially I'd put a sunrise image there because I came up to photograph the sunrise over Mount Fairweather. But the sunrise picture, it has those very beautiful reddish tints, and they just clashed with the two images on the left and the right. And so the designer told me, you have to use a more neutral image. And then I ended up using a mid-morning image. Also, that's not the one that, as a photographer, you would normally favor. So so here you see how I organize things for each of the parks. I selected the locations, a number of representative locations, and then for each location, add a number of images, and eventually add a photo editor helped me by ranking images, and then the designer finalize the layout. So eventually I was able to publish the book by using some form of hybrid publishing, which means that I finance the entire book, but I used a professional team from a publisher, and also to be able to get distribution of the book. And so here you see the final specs of the book. So I was able to realize my vision and offer the book for a price which was very reasonable for what you get. The Treasured Lands is really my opus magnum, and so I was very gratified that the book was well received and eventually won 12 book awards. So here's the website of the book, so you can just look for them on Google, Treasured Lands or Our National Monument, which is a project that is even more exciting to me. So in general, when a book is sold on Amazon, the author makes a few dollars only between all the middlemen. So when you buy a book directly from the author, it benefits them much more. So Our National Monuments is a project that I just completed last year. So when you hear about national monuments, the first thing that comes to mind is things like that, you know, the Statue of Liberty or presidential monuments on the mall, or the statues, these kind of things. But in America, the term national monument is more general and more specific. It refers to federally protected areas which are designated by the president, by executive order. And so the first national monument was actually not a man-made thing, but the David's Tower in Wyoming. It was proclaimed in 1906. And the Grand Canyon itself first gained protection as a national monument before becoming a national park. So the rationale of the law that allows this proclamation, which is called the Antiquities Act of 1906, is that national parks are designated by Congress, but Congress debates, and from time to time they take too much time. And by 1906, they hadn't yet protected the Grand Canyon, and commercialization was becoming rampant, you know. And so Theodore Roosevelt saw that he had to act fast to protect the area. And with the Antiquities Act, he could just, by executive order, designate it a national monument. So the picture is taken actually from, not from Grand Canyon National Park, but from an adjacent national monument, which is called Grand Canyon Parashant. Grand Canyon sees 4 million visitors per year, but there is hardly anybody in Parashant. When I was there, each day I was by myself at the rim of the Grand Canyon. And in Parashant, you have access to the Grand Canyon that you don't even have in the park. For instance, here, this is a Whitmore Overlook. From there, it's only about 900 feet elevation gain to hike down to the river. Whereas when you try to hike to the river from the south rim or from the north rim, it is 3 or 4 times as much. So here, this is a view from Mount Logan in Parashant, and it's a view that gives you an overlook of the entire Grand Canyon ecosystem that you don't have in the national park because it doesn't have the mountains that surround the canyon. And best of all, the national monuments are much less regulated than the national park. So in Grand Canyon National Park, you have to stay in the campgrounds. It's strictly prohibited to camp outside of the campgrounds. In Parashant National Monument, you can camp anywhere you want. And for instance, we drove right to the edge of the rim, and we set up our tent just right there at the spot where we were going to take our sunrise picture. So here's another example. This is a giant Sequoia National Monument that borders Sequoia and Kings Canyon National Park. The monument has actually more Sequoia trees than the national park, but because it is a national monument managed by the Forest Service, drones are authorized, whereas they are prohibited in the national parks. So when I was there, I was the only person actually at the base of the tree. There's no fence surrounding the tree. I could come right to the tree and hug it and even get inside to shoot out. And since there was nobody around, I had no qualms about disturbing other people by sending out my drone. So what got me interested in the national monuments 4 years ago was that in 2017, President Trump had issued an order to review national monuments. So he wanted to figure out if some national monuments were too big, if they impaired economic growth, if they should be open to resource extraction. And so 22 national monuments on land were under review and 5 monuments on water. So in December 2017, after the review, he announced that 2 national monuments would be shrunk. So the first was Grand Staircase Escalante, that used to be the largest national monument in the continental US. And it was reduced in size by 50%. So Grand Staircase Escalante is a wonderland of rock, has everything, slot canyons to this one here. It was such a tight squeeze that I had to leave my camera backpack because I wasn't able to fit with it. So just in a small area, it has incredible variety of slot canyons. And then this arch here that I photographed at sunrise. And so actually the sun comes from the other side. And here I use an artificial light to light this side here. And when I was there, I had the place entirely to myself. Was when you come to photograph the Mesa Arch, now you have to come 1 hour before sunrise, and still you will be shoulder to shoulder with other photographers. Bears Ears National Monument is the second national monument that was shrunk by the executive order of 2017. And that one, it was shrunk by 85%. So besides the vista, what made the monument remarkable was that it was the first parkland that was established at the initiative of native tribes. It has more archaeological sites than any other park in the Southwest. So fortunately, the national monuments were restored, as you know, this last year by President Biden. So this image here, I added a light here and in the kiva, to evoke the time when they were in use. So for our national monuments, one of the differences with treasured lands is instead of writing the text, I invited the Conservation Association, the local activists that care for those places, and in many cases were instrumental in their designation, to write an introduction for each of the 22 land national monuments and 5 marine national monuments in the book. But besides that, because treasured lands was so well received, I thought that I shouldn't change a winning formula, and so I use exactly the same design with pages with no text and large photos. So here the formation that you see is a white pocket, incredible formation. I think maybe acre for acre, the most incredible piece of rock in the Southwest, still accessible without a permit. So so I tried to depict details as well as grand landscape, and so here that's on the right side you have the wave. So the wave is world famous, and if you want to visit it, you have to get a permit. Sometime in time it takes years to get one, but they just triple the quota or something, so it's slightly easier now. But on the left, that's a formation that some people call the third wave. And this one is also in another permit area, because it is not as well known as a wave, you have maybe 10 times more chances to get the permit. And on the right side of the picture here, you see the Paria Canyon. The Paria Canyon is twice as long as the Zion Narrows, but there's almost nobody there. So when I went there for the entire day, I saw maybe a dozen people, mostly backpackers. It's equally as beautiful. And just like in Treasured Lands, so same formula with the information spreads and the maps. Okay, I'm to finish this presentation here by saying that visiting the national parks and monuments has brought me incredible joy and happiness. And my wish is that to inspire people to experience the same joy for themselves. And if so I hope that you will visit our public lands, and then if they have enriched your life, that in turn you will try to do something for them. Okay, so I'm to try to stop the screen share. Okay. Okay. All right, here we are. Okay, let's see. I don't have sound again.
Well, and actually nobody's saying anything, QT.
Okay.
We're all just kind of dumbfounded, I think, and awestruck with your presentation and the imagery and your story and the journey to get both of those projects completed.
Thank you.
I guess we can open it up for questions. I don't see any questions in the chat, so if anybody has any questions, feel free to jump in with questions, either through the chat or through the microphone.
This is Kathy, and I just wanted to say, QT, that what a beautiful presentation. I serve on the National Parks Conservation Association here in Alaska, and
Great.
What you're doing to protect our parks is just absolutely beautiful. And I'm going to have to get a copy of your book now. So thank you very much. That was just a really inspiring presentation. I absolutely love our national parks and hope to, I don't know if I'll make it to all of them, but they're on my list.
Well, it took me about 10 years to do my first round of visits.
Yeah.
I too will have to look at buying your book. That definitely intrigued me. And I've been to a number of national parks, but there's many more on my list yet, especially those in Utah area. So
yeah, I would say that's the plateau. I think that may be the most unique area, I think, in the US. It's unique meeting, I'd say, of geology, light.
Yep.
We do have a question in the chat asking if you had sparked any public land movements in Europe or perhaps your home of France.
When I was in France, I didn't really visit the national parks because back then I was going climbing every weekend. But I think the national parks, I think, is one of America's best idea. Maybe America's best idea, I don't know, but it's an idea which has been exported worldwide, and so now almost every country has national parks. But here in the US, I think we had a unique opportunity because when the national parks movement started, the country was not totally settled, so there was still a lot of wilderness that we could preserve.
QT, where are your books available? Could you explain that?
Well, it's available everywhere books are sold. I would say, like they
okay.
say. But if you do a search for the title, you will find either Treasured Lands or Our National Monuments in Google. I think the first link will be my website, and then you will find it on Amazon too. Yeah.
Okay, QT, I have to ask, do you have a favorite national park?
Yeah, so when I was asked for several years, that question puzzled me, because they are all so different that it's difficult based on the merits. But now I answer the question based on my relationship with the parks. So Yosemite is the first park I visited. That's a place that brought me to the US. That's a park that I visited more than any other park. And so because I've developed that relationship with the park, that is my sentimental favorite.
Mm. Oh.
Well,
Do you have
the photos were just inspiring. Yeah.
Thank you.
Do you have an idea for the next project?
Yeah, I've kind of an idea, but it's a bit tough in the sense that initially I was going to try to photograph lands even more obscure than the national monuments, because the idea with our national monuments was to try to bring awareness of to some lands that people don't know about, and then there was there's another system of lands which is called the national conservation lands. So I was thinking about trying to after that to photograph all of those, but I have to see how it goes for our national monuments, because I would say it's been a big investment, and I have to see if at least I'm able not to lose money on that investment by printing the book before I do another one about even more obscure lands. But that's what I would like to do, at least if I see that our national monuments, I'd say, sells reasonably.
Right.
Well, any other questions, anyone? Okay. All right. Well, thank you again, QT. It's a pleasure to meet you virtually, and look forward to meeting you someday in person. But I again encourage everybody to get both of the books. I'm proud to say I was in the first printing of the Treasured Lands, because you've gone on to subsequent printings now, but they're wonderful books. They're inspiring, they're informative, and I think there's still something to be said about a stunning photo book that you can hold in your hands, despite how accustomed we are all becoming digital consumers. There's still something to be said about a hardbound book, and it's just stunning work. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you again, Carl, for inviting me, and thank you to all of you for attending.
Thank you. That was really great.
Yeah, thank you very much.
It was wonderful. Thank you.
And you can stay for Carl's pictures if you like.
Oh yeah, I will.
And I'll let you narrate here.
Okay, so again, QT, this is the member slides part of our meeting. This is where any members can share any recent photos they've had, or any photos they just want to share with the group. And it's one of the fun things about ASONP as an organization, is that you, at any level, you're welcome to open yourself up to showing your work and sharing it with people from all over the state and sometimes other parts of the country. So I was inspired by QT's presentation tonight on our treasured lands to share a little bit about a project I've started with a writer and a longtime conservation activist in Las Vegas. And we're going to be doing a project highlighting the Southern Nevada wilderness areas. Much like the national monuments, the wilderness areas are all managed by different land agencies. It depends on who the original federal landowner was in possession of it when Congress decided to designate part of that land as federally protected wilderness under the Wilderness Act. So one of our goals of this book is to, kind of like what QT's goal is with our National Monuments book, that is to highlight some lesser known areas and to really celebrate the values of wilderness and to highlight some areas in Southern Nevada that could also be established as wilderness. And particularly too, I think this is really timely because so many of our Southwest national parks are literally getting loved to death. They're getting way too many visitors. You're doing timed entries now in national parks like Arches. And we're getting to a point where they're going to be restricting the number of vehicles that can go in. Might even have to be doing permit entries for some national parks. We're already to that point anyway, like going into Carlsbad caverns is a timed entry as well. But so I'm just going to highlight, I just did a week's worth of a trip here back in November. This is just a short hike off the road in the Lake Mead National Recreation Area. I went over there to go to the next slide. Go visit the Muddy Mountain Wilderness, and it's one particular area. If we can go to next slide, I can't, here we go. And so I went for a hike in the afternoon, evening in the Muddy Mountains Wilderness, and just really kind of explored the different rock forms, the different lines. Found some mini slot canyons that were really cool, and like this shot here with the tumbleweed all kind of blown into a corner. A lot of really neat shapes, and didn't see a single soul the whole time I was there, which is one of the, I think the advantages of wilderness areas is they're not as easy to get to, and you have to hike in a little bit in this case, and they're really isolated, so they're a lot more easy to enjoy on your own. Next slide. Next slide. There we go.
Beautiful.
And a lot of cases, playing with the a lot of the foreground and background play. This particular shot here, just I was hiking my way back out, and the sunset was hitting, and I was finding what kind of foreground can I get to go with the sunset, because it's not like Alaska where sunset lasts like a couple of hours. I know that when you're in the lower 48, you got to move a lot more quickly. And then I found this sandstone formation that just blew my mind. I absolutely have to go back and shoot this sandstone formation for a sunrise to get the light hitting the sandstone formation first light, but it was just fantastic. Next. And of course, keep shooting on the way out, even though it's still getting dark. And I came across this this line of this rock formation I passed earlier in the day, and it's kind of a very turquoise green rock formation, but because it's a lighter tone, as the sun has gone down, it's now reflecting the deep blues of the sky. So it's really changed the color of the rock. And I really loved, I dug how it looked differently at night compared to during the day. Next. And now it's getting dark, and I was going along and I was doing some dusk shots of just silhouettes of the landscape form. But then I saw this just kind of lone bush sitting here. So I did something I don't do a whole lot of when it comes to landscape photos. I did a little light painting on it to highlight that isolated bush in the center of the landscape. Next. So there's more Joshua trees in southwest than there are at Joshua Tree National Park. This is the Wee Thump Joshua Tree Wilderness, which is about an hour south of Las Vegas. It's only a 6,000 acre wilderness area. And according to the sign at the wilderness area entrance, it's only one of two completely flat wilderness areas in the US. And the other one, of course, is in Nevada. So I found this cholla cactus here with some Joshua trees in the background, the moon in the sky, that I thought was just kind of a great evening dusk shot to work on. Next. And then next morning, you know, classic Joshua tree silhouette against colors of dawn. And you can camp anywhere in here. There was a couple of pullouts where you could pull out and park your car. So I just pitched a tent at one of those next to my car to keep it simple. But you could just hike in and go, and it was just completely quiet the whole time. Nobody else was there. Next shot. So then just immediately west of Las Vegas is the kind of the very famous Red Rocks Canyon conservation area. It's one of those national conservation areas that QT was talking about, but it also fronts the Rainbow Mountains Wilderness area. So there's these big wall of bluffs behind to the west of Vegas. And that's also another wilderness area, the Rainbow Mountains Wilderness Area. So next slide. So I took one of the hikes up into a canyon, up into the day before, actually, I had been hiking up another trail that was on the top of these bluffs. So this time I decided to go into one of the canyons to explore around a little bit. Next. And again, one of the things I absolutely loved about this canyon hike was the sandstone rocks. You know, it's a canyon that gets washes like a lot of canyons in the Southwest do. So a lot of piled up rock that's been polished, mostly sandstone, but just some really just beautiful colors that are just great to capture in the diffuse light of a shaded canyon like this. Next.
That's the last image.
That's the last one. Okay, I didn't know if that was the last one or not. So yeah, that's it for my recent-ish November trip to some southern Nevada wilderness areas, and look forward to seeing more of that stuff as we work on documenting the wilderness areas and also some of the uses of the areas like canyoneering, climbing, mountain biking, things like that.
I know you were talking about the overcrowding and, they're limiting access and everything. I was thinking the other day, when I lived in Colorado, we took a trip over to Maroon Bells and you could access it, you could drive into it and everything.
Yeah.
They don't allow camping there at all. So if you want like a sunrise or sunset shot, you're going to have to make some pretty special arrangements because they only allow shuttles in there if you want to access Maroon Bells. And like I say, there's no camping there at the lake. So, yeah, it's too bad because it was kind of nice being able to just go into the park anytime you wanted to, but now, it's limited and too many people, like you say.
And I think that as much as we all love the proliferation of digital photography, it's really opened up photography a lot. Social media has opened us up in many ways to connect, but I think those two things together also are contributing to this overuse of certain areas of our park because people are seeing more of these images that they themselves want to go recreate and they want to go to those spots, and it just kind of expands and just becomes an unrelenting cycle of more and more use of the same areas.
Yeah, people are far more rude. They can see you're trying to get a picture. You got your camera on a tripod and they'll walk right in front of you to get a picture with their iPhone. I mean, just, yeah. Not as good as it used to be, where you could pretty much be by yourself at night shooting the aurora. Now you got to fight the crowd. So,
And what are your thoughts, QT, on some of these areas in our national parks that are getting overused and what's kind of driving that?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's there. The world is getting around about the national parks, and so there they are now one of America's main attractions. People come all around the world to visit them. And some they're fairly small area. When you think about a place like Arches National Park, you know, there's only so many parking spots in the park, so they do fill up. Yeah. So the thing about the national parks is that I think people don't really know the extent of the national park system, and so they tend to go to the most well-known places. I think that's one of the problems.
Yeah.
So hopefully projects like your National Monuments books and other projects can help to show people that there are other beautiful places they can go to and maybe spread the love around a little bit.
Well, even in Treasure Lands, you know, one of my goals was to bring some attention to the lesser known parks.
Yeah.
Well, at least we here in Alaska know there are certain parks that we don't have to worry about crowds.
That's right.
Like Kobuk Valley and Gates of the Arctic, for example.
Yeah.
Hey, Carl.
Yeah.
Your images were from a couple of wilderness areas. Could you repeat one was Rainbow Mountains, I think.
Yeah, Rainbow Mountains Wilderness, and I accessed it from two different points. One near a town called Mountain Springs, and the other one was on a hike from the Red Rock Canyon National Conservation Area into the Rainbow Mountains Wilderness. Another one was the Muddy Mountains Wilderness, which is just north of the Lake Mead National Recreation Area. And then the third one was called the Wee Thump, and it's two words, W-E-E, and then Thump, T-H-U-M-P, Joshua Tree Wilderness, and that's about an hour south of Vegas. And all three of them are managed by the Bureau of Land Management. So the same land management agency that's usually involved with mining, logging, off-roading, and cattle grazing is in charge of managing these areas as wilderness.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Good rice I've been to.
This is Jen. I wanted to ask QT, have you been to the Misty Fjords National Monument outside of Ketchikan yet? I know that is considered the Yosemite of the North because of the granite faces that are 3,000 feet below the water and 3,000 feet above.
No, I haven't been there yet, but I would certainly like to go. And I mean, I know it's also a very large monument, just like the Admiralty Island. I mean, they are just like the Alaska parks. They are in a class of their own. The Alaska National Monuments are too, but the Alaska parks, I kind of save them for last because they are the most difficult to access, and so that's kind of the same for the national monuments too. But at one point, I hope indeed to visit all the national monuments, and definitively those two.
Thank you. I had the chance to go there this past summer, and we were lucky, and the weather was really clear, and we did a 2-hour small float plane flight through the canyons, and it was absolutely incredible. And our guide was describing that there's park cabins that you can rent and just fly out there and be all by yourself for a week or however long. And so I was really impressed. It was just spectacular. Thank you.
Yeah.
Anything else? Well, if not, that was a great presentation. QT, thank you very much for your time. And we'll plan to see everybody next month at the museum, fingers crossed. Have a good night.
Yeah.
Bye,
Thank you,
everybody.
QT.
Hi, everybody.
Thank you, QT. That was really great.
Thank
And Carl too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank
Thank you. Thank you all.